Hey everyone, I'm sure you've seen about 20 different videos about this already, but after, I don't know, it hasn't even really been, oh well, it has. Oh, actually no, it hasn't. After about, what, half a week of playing Wuthering Waves, I thought I'd make a video talking about what I like about the game and what I don't like about the game, particularly in the frame of comparing it to things done in Genshin, because I feel like that's what a lot of people are comparing it to. So I've got a short list of some things that I really like about the game, some things that are okay-ish, and then some things I'm really disliking. And we'll just go down through the list. The first thing is the combat. The combat in this game is really, really good. I really, really like it, especially the bosses. I think the boss fights are some of the best in the game, especially the humanoid bosses, Thundering Mephis, the Crownless, the Dreamless. Those are all really fun boss fights. They're very well made. They feel very fun, and I feel like it really takes advantage of the gameplay and the style of gameplay that they went for this. In particular, the starting character, the main character, Rover, the first version you get, the Spectre Rover, feels very, very nice to play. The gameplay is very smooth, the attacks are smooth, the special ability or the special characteristic of the Rover, the Forte circuit, feels very nice. You can do a basic auto attack combo of 3 auto attacks into a charge attack, and that'll immediately fill up one of your bars. You can then use that to use your skill, and if you have one of those bars, you will do more damage, and then you can do an additional basic attack after using your skill to do another combo. It's very nice, it feels very fluid, the ultimate is very nice with the stun, and the Spectre Rover's outro skill, creating a time dilation field to slow everything down for your next character, also feels very nice to transition to early on in the game. Next is the dodge system, which is something that I really like. It feels very nice, you get a cool little like time dilation slowdown effect when you do it, and you get to do a counterattack if you hit basic attack. The only thing I don't really like about it is that there are some attacks on some enemies where they will dive past you or move past you in some sort of way to where when you dodge, when you go to counterattack, you just swing at air and hit nothing because they've already moved and you have to run them down, which can be very annoying for most of the melee characters. The exception I've found so far with the characters I have is Mortefi. He feels nicer in this regard, since his counterattack just has him shoot one big shot. I assume Chisha also has something similar, I just don't use her as much. But that would be my only real complaint right now. You could also, I guess, just look at it as filling up your concerto gauge and just be like, oh, I dodged an attack. But I don't know. The lack of effective counterattacks sometimes does kind of bug me. The next thing is exploration, which I feel like is one of the biggest things that people are going to talk about when they compare it to Genshin. The exploration is really, really fun for me. There's infinite out-of-combat sprint. Just comparing it to playing Genshin after playing Wuthering Waves, it feels like the sprint speeds are about the same. It's kind of hard to tell, the worlds are different sizes, it's not exactly the same. But the sprint in Genshin and the sprint in Wuthering Waves felt like they were about the same speed. The difference being that in Wuthering Waves, out of combat sprint, out of combat? The difference... The next thing is exploration, which I feel like is what people... The next part is exploration, which I feel like is going to be a big thing that people talk about when they compare the two games. And in my opinion, I think the exploration, or at least the movement in Wuthering Waves, is much better than Genshin's. I've played Genshin right after playing Wuthering Waves just to get a comparison, and it seems like the sprint speeds in both games are about the same. It's hard to tell exactly because the games are different, the worlds are different sizes, the characters are different sizes, but it feels like they're about the same. The difference being that in Wuthering Waves, the out-of-combat sprint is infinite, so you can just run forever as long as you're not in combat, and as long as you're not climbing up something. Which means it's a lot faster to move around, and it feels a lot nicer because you're just able to cover more ground quicker. I guess the counterpoint to that would be that there are no characters with any sort of movement skills like in Genshin. There's nobody that has a skill like Yelan's E, or Sayu's E, or Wanderer's E, or alternate sprints like Mona or Ayaka. But it is what it is. The one thing I would say is I kind of still wish that both games had mounts like in Tower Fantasy, but it is what it is, it's still very nice, and the out-of-combat sprint being infinite is a big plus over Genshin. The other thing about exploration that I really like is the wall running. So, Wuthering Waves has two different ways of climbing. You have climbing like you do in Genshin. I believe there is also a sort of jump climb like in Genshin and in most other open world games. You can climb up normally, you can jump to cover more distance at the expense of more stamina, but Wuthering Waves also has a thing where if you press sprint while climbing, you will automatically transition into a wall run, which will let you climb up things very, very quickly at the cost of very high stamina consumption. This makes it really nice to explore things, because most of the time, you don't have to climb up extraordinarily tall walls or cliffs, and so what you can do is you can just be free running around with your infinite sprint, and you'll come across a wall or a short ledge or something like that, and your character will automatically start running up the side, get to the top, and then once they get to the top, their stamina will automatically start refilling because the sprint is infinite. And the final thing I really like about the exploration is that there's actual mantling in this game. One of my biggest gripes with Genshin, and something that they have gotten better with some of the newer areas, but it's still present, is anytime you meet any sort of ledge that extends above your character, it's near impossible to climb. There's basically nothing you can do. If you try to climb, your character will just continue to climb in place until they eventually just fall off the side for no reason. And if you try to sprint climb over it, they'll just jump into the ledge and not surmount it. Something that I find very annoying, and in my opinion, one of the biggest flaws of Genshin's exploration is the fact that there's no mantling. There is mantling in Wuthering Waves. It can be a little finicky, and you can still get stuck on things in some areas, but most of the times, in my experience, when you come across any sort of ledge, your character will do this kind of like flip thing, where they will just kind of flip themselves over the ledge. And it's just a really nice thing to have. You don't have to worry about like, oh no, I have to figure out how do I want to get around this thing? How do I want to climb up this area without hitting any ledges, making sure everything's like a smooth surface? Just makes climbing a lot nicer. And the last thing I want to talk about in this section is the gameplay cycle. So the echo grinding, the way you get artifacts in Wuthering Waves, is entirely free, unlike Genshin where you have to do domains and you have to spend resin. You don't have to spend any wave plates in Wuthering Waves to do this, you just fight enemies. You just go around the overworld and you fight things. The great part about this is it's completely free. It doesn't cost you anything, and you get some amount of character experience, and then the normal enemy drops that you can use to level up your characters and weapons, just like in Genshin. The downside is that since it doesn't cost you anything, you don't have a 100% chance of getting an echo when you defeat an enemy. On top of that, there's the same kind of thing that you have in Genshin, where you have different sets and different main stats and substats, but overall, I think it's pretty good. I really like that you can just keep doing it. It's a very fun thing to do. You can run around, and they have implemented a thing where some echoes will be different colors, kind of like shiny Pokemon. So you always have a chance of getting some fancy, like, ooh, my echo is a different color. The other thing is that since you just kind of do it wandering around, you're passively exploring, which means you come across chests, you come across Sonnet's caskets, which are Wuthering Waves versions of the oculi, and you just get to see the world. You come across a lot of things, you can start quests, and you can kind of just wander wherever. It really helps encourage an exploration of the world, which I feel like is something that isn't really present in Genshin, because I feel like a lot of people will either take their time and explore, or they'll just beeline to all of the waypoints in the domains, and then they'll just fast travel everywhere. The other thing that I really like about the gameplay cycle is that for the tacit fields, which I'm not even sure if there's anything similar in Genshin, I don't really think there is. There's sort of areas on the maps where you can start a challenge, fight some enemies, and then at the end you get a variety of different things. I guess they're the closest thing you could call to domains in Genshin. I guess you do get echoes from them. It's about the closest thing you could call a domain. But aside from the tacit fields, you also have the overworld bosses, which are the same thing as they are in Genshin. They give you ascension materials for your characters, and then they also have a chance of dropping themselves as an artifact or an echo. And the great part about these is these respawn very quickly. It's not quite immediate. I think it's somewhere between a minute to a minute and a half, but It's much quicker than Genshin's 3 to 5 minutes, and you can pretty much have them always be up the second you defeat them, unless you're going like really fast. Like I said, 60 seconds to a minute and a half. I mean, if you can beat the boss in 60 seconds, then I guess you have to wait. But personally, I can't yet, and it means that if I ever want to farm for a boss, right now I'm leveling up Baiji. Every time I fight the, whatever it's called, the Lumen something Myriad, whenever I defeat it, I claim its rewards, and then after I open the menu or just wait a little bit, there it is again, and I can fight it again right away. So that's very nice and convenient. Now, moving on to some things that I think are just kind of okay, or things that I feel neutral about in the game. Going back to the gameplay cycle, because of that lower drop rate, because it's only a 20% chance to get an echo when you defeat an enemy, it can feel like leveling your databank has some highs and lows. In Wuthering Waves, when you absorb an echo, when you get a drop, it goes into your databank, and for every new echo that you get, every unique enemy that you defeat and get its echo for, you get databank experience. You also get databank experience if you get a duplicate echo, but it is of a higher rarity. And the higher your databank level, the higher rarity echoes you can get, and the increased chances you have for their drops, or at least for the rarities to drop. I currently just hit databank 15, which means I now have the ability to get 5-star echo drops, and it's currently a 30% chance to get a 5-star and a 70% chance to get a 4-star. Before that, it was a 75% chance to get a 4-star and a 25% chance to get a 3-star at level 14. So you kind of have this weird lull because of these weighted rates of rarities, where when you start off, you can pretty easily level up your databank. You don't need that much experience for each one. I think it's about 180 experience. And you're constantly finding new enemies, you're constantly getting new echoes, and you're getting all sorts of experience. Eventually you reach a point where you pretty much have all of the available echoes, and so now the only way for you to get any more experience is for you to go back and refight or regrind or refarm enemies that you've already defeated and gotten their echoes, and just hoping that you get a higher rarity. Which doesn't seem too bad, but then you get into a situation where, let's say, I don't know what level is exactly, but let's say databank level 12, and you want to get to a next level, let's say 13 gives you a 50% chance for a 4-star and a 50% chance for a 3-star, but right now you have a 75% chance for a 3-star and a 25% chance for a 4-star. You will have to go around, fight a bunch of enemies, and then not only do you have to fight the 20% chance for drop, you also have to fight whatever percentage chance you have to get that next higher rarity to get that level experience. So you can level up really quickly, and then it kind of feels like you hit a wall, but then once you get past that and you unlock a newer rarity or a higher drop chance rate, then everything goes quickly again, and then things slow down, so you kind of have this sort of back and forth kind of rubber banding of progress for the databank, which can be kind of annoying, and especially can be very disheartening if you're just trying to get to a new level. But, as I said previously, because it is free, you can kind of just do it however you want, so the only thing you really end up spending is your time, and that time, like I said earlier, can be done just by exploring, trying to find chests for more asteroids for pulls, or finding Sonnet's caskets to unlock those rewards, or just trying to get exploration percentages to get those rewards as well. The next thing would be the controls and the UI that I'm kind of lukewarm about. In my experience, the menu hotkeys can feel sort of unresponsive, and the animations or the transitions between menus can be very jarring, and so I've often had times where I've gone to open up the main menu to click on my databank or click on something else, and I've hit escape and nothing's happened, and I've hit escape again, and then the menu will quickly open and then quickly close again because I've hit the key twice. The same thing happens with the map. Sometimes I'll press the map button, it won't open, I'll press it again, and it'll quickly open and close just because there was a little bit of lag. I assume that's just because of the game optimization, and hopefully that will be something that they fix, but it is nonetheless something that I'm not too keen on. And the last part is performance. The game does not look good. It looks so bad. It looks horrible. Not everything looks horrible, but most of it looks pretty bad. The playable characters will render fine both in-game as your character and in cutscenes they render perfectly fine. The NPCs, not so much. They really do get NPC syndrome. I have a couple funny screenshots of an NPC whose face did not load in, so it was just this pale blob. I was doing the main story quest, and there were tons of NPCs whose clothing didn't render in, so they were just these really like fuzzy blob colored things that I couldn't really tell what they were. And while the environment looks fine, the rivers look fine, the water looks fine, the cliffs look fine, the grass look fine. Anytime, and I have no idea how they determine this, I assume this is somehow like what they're called inside the game. If you come across anything that is, I'm gonna say, non-natural or man-made, stuff like buildings, roads, some of the bridges, some of the walls in the city, just walls and buildings, and like the destructible boxes, sometimes they'll just be strangely low res. I'm not exactly sure why, but they'll just be like really, really low res, like they're from a PS1 game or something. I've seen it happen with enemies as well, but only on specific enemies, like the Chaser Razor Spider has kind of like a giant car around it for its carapace, and I've seen some sort of fuzzy graphics there, but I've mainly noticed it with buildings and stuff like that, which I believe has gotten better since launch, but it's still definitely there. The other thing too is that, from what I'm aware, most of this, in terms of the poor textures, is just due to something in how Unreal Engine 4 works, which is something that the devs really don't have any control over. It's just how Unreal works. And the only other thing they could really do to fix it would just be not using Unreal Engine 4 to make the game. I believe Genshin uses Unity, so there's that difference there. So I'm aware that this is somewhat just like an engine limitation. It's just how Unreal does things, and it's kind of weird like that. But nonetheless, it is something that is not amazing for the game. And then finally, moving on to the bad. The biggest thing, one of my biggest gripes so far, is the map UI. So when the game came out and there really wasn't a good interactive map, I was forced to use a variety of different pins to mark a variety of different things. I ended up marking all of the Sonnets caskets with stars, following what I do with the Oculi in Genshin and using the star there. But in my opinion, the bigger problem with the map is the fact that there is an enormous click radius. When you click on the map, if you are anywhere close to another pin, it'll just say, oh, you mean this pin, and it won't let you place down another pin. I have the same problem with Genshin. If you're too close to a quest marker or a teleport waypoint, it'll just be like, oh, you mean this teleport waypoint? And I'm like, no, I'm trying to mark where I am on the map. Except it's at least 10 times worse in Wuthering Waves. I've had times where I've been maybe half an inch away from any other pin, and I've clicked, and it's like, oh, do you mean that pin? And so then I have to move my mouse again. Moving on, another thing I really don't like in more system UI is that I haven't found any sort of in-game indicator of what materials you need to ascend a character, besides just getting them to whatever their current max level is and hitting ascend. In Genshin, you can there's the arrow that you can click and it'll show you how much of the boss material you need, how much of the enemy material, and then like how much of the regional material you need, along with the Mora and everything else like that. I've not found anything like that in Wuthering Waves. The only way I've been able to find it is either going to an external site online and looking it up, or just getting a character to whatever max level they are, clicking ascend and seeing what I need. Other things I'm not a big fan of are the overworld puzzle controls. There are a couple different things like this. There are puzzles on the floor where you have to light up the squares based on different, I guess, light pins that will light up all the rows in a certain direction. So a 4-sided will light up all of the rows in the 4 cardinal directions, a 2-sided will only do 2 of those directions, a 3-sided will do 3, stuff like that. The controls for that don't feel amazing. You press T to pick them up, and then you press left mouse to place them down, and then you press E to rotate them, which is something that just doesn't feel quite right to me. I don't know. I really like just clicking left mouse to rotate things. So the controls don't feel the nicest to me. That could just be a personal preference though. And the other thing I don't like in relation to puzzles is that there are some puzzles that involve some sort of throwable object. There are the classic vines, the thorny vines that you must burn down with fire, a classic. It's a staple of like open world exploration. And then there are also these glowing rocks that you need to pick up this sort of light crystal thing, and when you throw the crystal at those glowing rocks, they'll explode and they'll destroy the rocks. That's fine. You press T to pick them up, you press left mouse to throw them, that works fine. You can hold G to aim where you want to throw them and then press left mouse. G, in my opinion, kind of a weird key, but it works. The thing I don't like about it is that there seemed to be some sort of invisible radius around the initial spawn point where you can pick up the item, where if you go outside of that, it'll just despawn the item and you have to run back over and pick it up. I assume it's to prevent people from cheesing puzzles or just wandering off too far, or maybe to like help guide them, being like, hey, this is near the thing you need to use it for. But it can feel kind of annoying because you don't really know how far you can go, and sometimes you have to stand right near the edge of that boundary in order to be close enough to actually throw it to hit what it needs to hit, which can be very annoying. Next, since we talked about the performance of the game or my opinions on how the game looks, I want to talk about some things that I very much so dislike about the performance of the game. And that is, I'm sure you've all heard it, the fact that the game runs very poorly. It is definitely not a finished game, or at least not a well-optimized game. Although I will say, I've played the game pretty much every day for extended periods of time since launch, and it has improved. It has gotten much better. I've even streamed it since then, and even then, it has felt better on stream than on launch. That first day of streaming, it was really, really rough. There were constant stutters, there was all sorts of lag, my ping was horrendous. It's gotten much better since then. It's still not amazing, but it has improved. The first thing is that I've found very noticeable lag when playing at 1080p 60 frames, with all of my settings set to low or off, except for VSync and NVIDIA Reflex. The other thing is, supposedly, some of the issues are because there are apparently two different PC versions. There is a DirectX 11 version and a DirectX 12 version, depending on, I guess, what hardware people have, and it automatically chooses which version you get based on your hardware. And apparently the DirectX 11 version is better optimized, so it runs better. I mean, it would make sense to me that the version for lower end hardware would be better optimized, but nonetheless, it is kind of strange and very annoying that there are two different PC versions and one of them runs better than the other, and you can't choose between them. And finally, and I say supposedly for these just because I personally have not witnessed them, I haven't been monitoring anything to see whether or not this is happening, but people say they are, and I'm willing to believe them, or at least say that this could be a possible reason, is that the PC version has a RAM leak, where the longer the game goes on, the more and more RAM it'll eat up. The file will just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it won't try to clean itself up. Apparently, the NVIDIA DLSS is something that will exacerbate this. It does not go away if you turn it off, but supposedly there is a $7 app on Steam that will fix this problem. I personally have not tried it because I've not bought it yet. And the other thing is pressing Alt-Enter to exit full screen and go to windowed, and then pressing it again to re-enter full screen mode can also fix this. I don't really have a frame of reference for this. For Genshin, I didn't start playing Genshin until 1.3, so I personally do not have any experience with what released Genshin was like, so I won't be commenting on that. I will, however, say that I can run Genshin fine on much higher graphic settings and with the NVIDIA filters on, and I can stream it just fine with no problems. I don't really have any lag, although I do understand that 1, it is a different engine, it's a Unity instead of Unreal Engine 4, and 2, Genshin has been out for much longer than Wuthering Waves has, and has much more time to work on optimization and work out any kinks that they have with the game. And the last thing I want to talk about is stuff related to combat in the game. I really do like the combat in this game. I think it's very fun, I think it's very nice, but most of that pertains to boss fights. I think the game works really well with the boss fights, and I almost feel like it was designed with the boss fights in mind and not so much with the other encounters, to where things can get awfully messy the second you're fighting more than 2 or 3 enemies at once, especially if it's a mix of ranged opponents and melee opponents. The first thing is that the camera lock-on in this game is awful. It's not good. I don't recommend using it. I thought it was bad first, and then I turned on auto aim and combat correction, and it made it so much worse. They actively hinder your ability to play the game because when you lock on, it hijacks your control of the camera, and so you can no longer move your camera. You are stuck at one fixed viewpoint, and the only way to change that viewpoint is to just physically maneuver your character around to the other side of an enemy and just hope the camera turns with it. There is an ability to center your camera and move it to right behind your character. However, that centering button is also the button that'll swap your auto-targeting and lock onto a different enemy, which means if you want to center the camera, you somehow just swap onto a different enemy, which is not terribly intuitive. The other problem I have with it is the switching targets is not intuitive like it is in any Souls-like game, where, for whatever reason, switching targets is a click in on the mouse wheel instead of scrolling, and you will switch to a new target based on some sort of unknown, predetermined rotation where you will always go from enemy 1 to enemy 2 to enemy 3 to enemy 4 to enemy 5 back to enemy 1, regardless of where those enemies are. So, if you are attacking an enemy, and there's another enemy next to you, you cannot necessarily switch to that enemy to dodge or target it. When you instead lock on to switch targets, it might just switch to some enemy in the back, and then you're trying to attack somebody who's nowhere near you. The other thing is that when you use your outro skills or intro skills on a character, they will sometimes just switch whoever they're targeting to some random enemy and teleport you somewhere far away, potentially even teleporting you into a new group of enemies, aggroing a second set of enemies in addition to the ones you are already fighting. It's just not that good. The next thing I dislike is that there are certain enemies that will roam. I came across this while fighting the Stone Bracers, trying to get an echo for Baja. Some enemies have a fixed spawn point, and then will walk. They have a patrol. And you can fight them anywhere in that patrol, that's not a problem. The problem is, upon being aggroed, the first thing they will do is attempt to return to their original spawn position. In the case of the Stone Bracers, they will begin running towards wherever they originally spawned in, and while you can still fight them while they're doing this, there is a chance that they will just despawn or in the middle of the fight just start running away, reach their spawn point, and then have their health fully restored like nothing ever happened. That can make it extraordinarily annoying to fight enemies. You can get them to almost dead, and then suddenly they just decide, hey wait, I need to be over here, and away they go and regain all their health. This can also happen to enemies that haven't even left their area. I was fighting a wolf earlier, and I had almost killed the wolf, and then it just despawned and respawned 2 feet away with full health, and I had to fight it again. So, I don't know exactly what causes it. I assume it's some sort of wonky, like, out-of-bounds area that they're supposed to be in, but it is very annoying, and it doesn't just only apply to enemies like the basic mob enemies in the overworld, it also applies to the overworld bosses. If a boss is pushed too far away from their original spawn point, whether that's because they have attacks that move them around, they do a lot of dives, they do spins, or they're just slowly getting edged away because you're attacking them and you're pushing them backwards, if they get too far away, they can just despawn and then reset with full health, and you now have to fight them once more. That makes it very, very annoying for reasons I really don't have to explain, and is something that has really soured my mood sometimes. And the final part of this is that fighting multiple enemies, therefore, because of all these problems, because of the weird auto-targeting, because enemies sometimes reset, fighting multiple enemies can be very tedious for all of these reasons. But yeah, this has become a very long video about the things I like and the things I dislike so far, but overall, I am pretty happy. I didn't really talk about the story, I didn't really care about the story that much. Really wanted to focus on the gameplay, and I do like playing the game, I really do, and as much as some of these things annoy me, I will continue to play the game because it is, at the end, a pretty fun game. It just has a couple little things that make it less enjoyable than it ultimately could be. So, I hope you all enjoyed listening to what I think about the game. I feel like they're pretty standard things. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully I'll have a trans-lyric video out soon, and everyone will be like, what's this random Wuthering Waves video in the middle of all these song things? Bye!